I get so many questions from people just like you about how to move with respect to their cycle. There's a lot of conversation that's starting to pop up in the interwebs about cycle synced fitness. And if you were with us in season 1, you will recognize this voice. Rock Hancock is going to be joining us again this week. I had a conversation season 1, episode 6 with Rock about moving with your cycle. So if you haven't had a chance to check out that episode, I would highly recommend it. It was a fabulous conversation. I have kept in touch with Rock over the years, and he has been developing some really awesome stuff. And he has just released something about moving with the feminine seasons. So taking into consideration the entire female life cycle. I had to have him back on the show because I loved our conversation so much before. And because I get so many questions about moving the body with the different phases of life, the different seasons of our cycle, and so on and so forth, he is totally the expert that I absolutely had to have back. Join us this week as we take a look at moving with the feminine seasons of your life and how to optimize all of those best with Rock Hancock. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an Eastern medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your menstrual health, offering period solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I am so excited, as always, for all of my episodes, but particularly excited about this one. I am welcoming back a familiar voice to the show today. If you remember from season 1, I had Rock Hancock on to talk about his program, Moving with Your Cycle, which was a very popular episode because women are starting to realize, oh, I can't exercise the exact same way that my husband can, and that's okay. And so that was one of the amazing topics that we covered in our episode in season 1. So if you've had an opportunity, you're going to recognize this voice. If you have not had an opportunity to check out that episode, it's in season 1. But welcome back to Rock Hancock. I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Thank you, Adrienne. I'm so happy to be here once again and talking about movement and the divine feminine. And I'll go ahead and reintroduce myself for all your new listeners. My name is Rock Hancock. I'm a natural movement coach, personal trainer, a little bit of rewilding health coach, as I'm calling myself. So integrating, nature-based health practices to help people, thrive in the modern world. And I'm also a postpartum and pregnancy corrective exercise specialist, certified there. And I kind of just have been working with mostly women my entire career. So since 2009, most of my clientele has been women, and I've learned a lot, and I'm still learning a lot. And it wasn't until I feel like I got that postpartum corrective exercise cert that I was like, oh, okay, now I'm like finally qualified. And that was just like 3 years ago. But all of those things kind of led me to what we were referring to as the move with your cycle, right? Like, oh, you're a menstruating woman and you're a cyclical being. And so I created that program following the tenets of natural movement and the cycles of the seasons and menstruation. And we developed that program and put it out there so that women could have a better idea of how to more intuitively train based on the season. And so I've since expanded upon that. And I now have a much more longer format guide that I recently published and it's the feminine seasons, a natural movement approach, and the main seasons are menstruation. So season one, women of menstruating age, and then pregnancy is season two, postpartum is season three, and the last season of the four is perimenopause slash menopause as the final feminine season. So,
I love this. So I had Rock on the show a couple of seasons ago because I had run across this live workshop that he was offering in Wisconsin. And I was like, is this being offered online or is it in person? Because we were still in that transitioning out of the pandemic phase. So I didn't know if I'd be able to actually enroll and watch it online. And he's like, no, it's in person. And I was like, oh, I just feel like this is an energy I need to connect with. And I'm so glad that I did because not only has he been an amazing guest on the show, but I have directed a lot of my clients to him because I get so many questions about why do I feel so exhausted? Or I'm looking in weightlifting forums that I'm part of because I lift. And, there's always a woman in there going, girls, pump me up. I'm exhausted today. Like, help me with motivation to get through this workout routine. And I'm the jerk that chimes in and goes, what day of your cycle are you on? Right? Because I'm that guy. And it's inevitably day 3. And it's like, you're not
Mhm.
supposed to power lift on day 3 of your cycle. Let's talk about how you could move with the different changes that you're experiencing in your body in a way that you don't feel like you have to have people pump you up because your energy is flatlined. You can actually adapt all of your movements to what's happening from a hormonal perspective during your cycle, which is why I was so excited about finding his program. And I'm bringing him back on the show today because this expansion in this offering, I think, is absolutely critical for women because our bodies have different needs at different times. We live in this culture where we're expected to get back into our pre-baby pants after we push a small human out of our body, and
Yeah.
we just can't.
Yeah. Or do other wifely duties earlier,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. When your body is not even yours, right? Like I've told friends, I was like, why don't you just masturbate more? Are you like that, like hard up? Like just, you can take care of yourself. You were 14 once, you know what you're doing. Like leave your wife alone. She's nursing your baby. Her body is not hers.
Yeah.
Relax, right?
Yeah. It's
And that's just the
time.
postpartum phase, right?
Mhm.
Which can be a journey for lots of women, right? Because your body changes, right? And
Mhm.
I get into a little bit of that in the postpartum section. Yeah, it's wild. Well, and, I feel like I've been having this conversation a lot lately. Like, we've acknowledged that women are not small men, like
Mhm.
somewhat. And, you and I, just before we started recording, you were talking about like husbands will be like, why can't you work out? Like me, it's like, oh, you're not different. I'm like, no, you're different. And then how do we get that across to like spouses so they better understand the needs? And, I also feel there's like a cultural issue where like women, empowered women are awesome. I love strong, capable women. But at the same time, there's this messaging and this societal expectation of women can be boss babes and hardcore moms. And they could
Mhm.
do all these things. And then there's that pressure of like, help me motivate myself in the forums. Like, I'm not doing a good job
Mhm.
because I'm not performing at these unrealistic expectations that society, culture, etc., put on women. And, that's a tough conversation to have, especially in certain, I would say, feminist circles. Like, I'm doing this good natural based women's work. But then there are some women who have told me I don't belong in the space.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I'm trying to hold that space because, in my view, men need to hold space for women and like help hold space, not just solely hold space. But like when my wife, we talk about with our boys who are, 6 and 3. So they're kind of with some things, like, hey, mommy's on her bleeding time. She needs space.
Mhm.
And I go, hey, I'll take more of the kids. If you need to sleep in a tent, because side note, we live out of a camper right now, for about a year. We're like halfway through that journey. And so we have tents. in our camper. So if an adult needs space, they can sleep away from the family.
Mm.
And so we kind of red tent it, right? We're like,
Mhm.
and then, the ebbs and flows on the farm. There's two other women here of menstruating age and, three kids. And so we're like, hey, not all, the women aren't all synced up. So we're like, hey, it's okay. Like the rest of us can pick up the slack.
Mhm.
You go take care of your body, honor that. And so that's been really cool to have this community that's embracing that divine feminine and having multiple people holding that space as a community so that things can get done and someone can actually rest. And because if it's winter, right, if we equate menstruation to winter, that's a time of rest,
Mhm.
right? Nature slows down, which here in Mississippi, where we are, winter isn't as long.
Mhm.
And like, you don't feel like I miss Wisconsin winter where you're like, oh, I get like months of rest, right? Well, we're here, you're like, oh, okay, like we picked wild violets the other day and made like lemonade. I'm like, it's way too early for violets here, or
Mhm.
for me and my brain, because I'm used to living up north. But, it's been cool to even like try to mimic those natural cycles, even in a place where the seasons are of different length. So,
Mhm.
and having people to do that. So,
Well, and
yeah.
think about how powerful that is, that you're mirroring this and you're modeling this for your boys. I mean,
Yeah.
they're going to be able to walk into partnerships later on in their life because,
Mhm.
regardless of who they choose to love, they're always going to have someone who is female that they love in their life. And
Yeah.
they're going to be able to meaningfully show up in those relationships and be like, oh, like I look at my own son, and my own son has far more information, understanding, and care as a almost 16-year-old male than, I mean, he knows more about
Yeah.
his girlfriend's period than she does. And
Yeah.
he holds space for that, because like when she
Mhm.
starts feeling really yucky, he has an idea of when it's coming and he'll be like, "Hey, how can I help you?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is amazing to see that
Mhm.
this behavior is already being modeled. Like, this is
Wow.
how we start honoring the feminine and changing that narrative. But it does,
Yeah.
it takes time. And I think
Takes,
that what
yeah.
you're contributing work wise to what we have for a knowledge base is critically important.
Yeah. And not to draw a contrast because, often social media based fitness and health is very combative with like opposing views. And that's why I'm like acknowledging that because there's lots of people talking about cycle thinking.
Mhm.
And you and I have had this conversation. There are people who compare it to the seasons, the four phases of the menstrual cycle. And there are other folks out there and like really big names, really with lots of fancy letters after their name, who are like, no, power through your period. Like that is when you're like, can compete the hardest. And, it is what I would say is that fitness culture. It is that type A personality, the endurance athletes, and like I'll say maybe higher masculine energy women who, like not honoring that feminine side. It's like, no, we could still compete with the men
Mhm.
and like, but then we're sacrificing health. And that's, where I feel the conversation needs to be focused more about is like,
Mhm.
yeah, you can do this during your period. You can compete in the Olympics on your period, but acknowledge that that is not a healthy thing to do. That is a fitness goal. And fitness, the more we go down the fitness road, the more we sacrifice our health.
Mhm.
Like Hippocrates said, if we can give every individual the right amount of nourishment and exercise, not too little and not too much, we would have found the safest way to health. Right.
Mm.
And it's, it is about that balance. And what is that balance? Depends on who you're following.
Mhm.
Right. And like with this guide, I'm just trying to get the lifespan of the feminine seasons and movement out there so that women can have a comprehensive guide
Mhm.
and make the most informed decision for their health. Right. And like, this is it. This is like my take. It's all there. Cause if we think about it, like when we're, the last season, perimenopause, menopause, the biggest concerns there are sarcopenia, muscle wasting, muscle loss, and then bone density issues, right?
Mhm.
But if we go all the way back to when you were put on a hormonal contraceptive, potentially in your like
Yes.
teens through early 30s, which those are the most crucial years to build bone density.
Mhm.
And if you're on a hormonal contraceptive, you can't build bone density.
Mhm.
And we recently learned, was it like 2 years ago, that like huge article research came out that goes, oh yeah, we kind of knew that. We like didn't say anything. And all these women who now have osteoporosis because they were early adopters of the pill, like they couldn't build bone density in like the most crucial years. And so like I feel like having all the information and looking at the timeline, you're like, oh, okay, that's a big concern there. What can I do now
Mhm.
in my like, you know, 15 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old, etc., and build that age adventurous body down the road. But we have to take that long view, and that's hard because we live in a quick fix, consumer based culture.
Yes, I did an
Yeah.
episode earlier this season called Holistic Wellness is Not an Amazon Prime Kind of Fix, because it's true. Like, we want everything fast, quick, and yesterday. And when I talk about moving with an eye towards where you are in your cycle, the first question that I get people, and I'm going to pose it to you because I really want people to hear the answer to this, is, well, but if I'm not doing the same things day in and day out or week after week, right? Because my movement intensity and what it is that I'm doing changes from week to week. Will I
Mhm.
still end up with results?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, say it
Yes.
again louder for
Yes.
the people in the back.
Yes. And, to break that down, like if you Google training programs and you find a website that talks about, macrocycles, mesocycles, splits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it can be overwhelming. But the principle people need to embrace is progressive overload. And that is, each week, each month, are you stressing your body slightly more, and it could be 1% better, right? Are you 1% better in the second month than you were the first month? And that's progress, right? Because there might be steps back, but, and that's where, I really try to encourage people to take a training mindset and not an exercise mindset. Because exercise, you're like, well, I'll do a little bit of this, I'll do a little bit of that, and that's okay, you know, but it's harder to gauge progress when we're exercising as opposed to a training mentality. And, I have a background in strength and conditioning. So like training is how my brain works, right? Like, no, if we're not measuring, if we're not tracking, then how do we know we're improving? And it doesn't need to be complicated, right? Like tracking can be like, okay, how does my body feel? I make a note, and then maybe like, what is the thing that I'm tracking during menses? What is the factor I'm training during follicular? Like follicular for, my program is that's like big, heavy movements, right? So what's my deadlift, like 5 rep max in my follicular phase? And am I increasing that? Yes, you only see follicular once a month, but as you go out 6 months, did you see your deadlift overall weight increase over those 6 months, or rep capacity or set capacity, measuring one of those factors? And as long as you're improving, you're fine. But we have to step back and think about Olympics. The Olympics are what, every 4 years? And so an Olympic athlete spends 4 years to try to make it to the Olympics. And then they have to be as good as they ever could be one day, sometimes in 4 years. So where are you going to be in 4 years? Where are you going to be in 10 years? And that's the mentality we need to embrace, because that's when we see systemic changes, right? Permanent changes. And you have to embrace that mindset. Professional athletes, they don't exercise, they train, they have coaches, they have support staff, which is hard when you don't have all the money in the world, right? But you can still adopt that mentality and go, okay, what am I doing today? And then what am I doing tomorrow? What am I doing next month? And just, again, follow that progressive overload. And it's really that simple. And you can even like linear progression for strength training, right? Like, am I adding 5 pounds? Am I adding 1 set? Am I adding 4 reps? And each week or each phase, right? So follicular, ovulation, each of those iterations, you're adding to it, and eventually it'll get better.
Mhm.
And it's just, yeah, it's easier to say, well, I don't know if I could do that because I'm not consistently training. And men, we can get away with it a little bit more, like training week to week, because we have a 24-hour cycle. So we PMS every single day, right? Which that's a thing. And, but we can get away with different training modalities because we have a different hormone cycle.
Mhm.
And it's not to say you can't get stronger. Like I have a ton of clients and friends who embrace their cycles and they have seen huge gains. And if anything else, like taking those respites more frequently will prevent overtraining. It'll prevent harder fatigue. And by honoring those hormone cycles, you can train more consistently longer without larger setbacks because you have a whole built-in week of recovery where like dudes, they'll do like a 6-week, 8-week block and then they hit a wall. They're like, what happens? Like, yeah, you should have taken like at least halfway through that, taken a respite week,
Mhm.
but we don't think we need it because we can theoretically train very similarly all day long. But it also comes at a cost, right? Because I'll just pound the volume,
Yeah.
but volume is volume. So,
I love that you said that about the fact that we had that built-in rest week. Now, rest can be rest. Rest can be gentle movement. Like for me, my
mhm,
rest week, because I do a lot of lifting in terms of
mhm,
that's my favorite form of exercise. I used to be a competitive kickboxer. I'm not being drawn to being punched in the face quite as much as I used to. I think age and wisdom come with that a little bit. But when I strength train, I do take a week off when I'm in my bleeding phase. And I never used to do that. It's actually how I found a menstrual cup because I used to not want to bleed through a tampon when I was at the gym. And, being sometimes one of two women at a boxing gym, like that was not an accident that I wanted to have. So, finding a
mhm,
menstrual cup for the lack of leak while I'm overtraining during a time period when I should be resting. I had short cycles, I had lots of clots, I had tons of pain. My endometriosis was at its worst. And when I started really honoring that rest week that you were just talking about and going for a walk during that time frame or gentle stretching or things of that
mhm,
nature, it made a huge difference because it didn't
mhm,
take me 3 to 5 days to recover and really feel my energy level come back up after my bleed. It was
mhm,
like when I actually had my FSH rise. So when your follicle stimulating hormone comes up on day 3, your energy level should start rising with it. And for a lot
mhm,
of people, it takes days after their bleed finishes for them to start feeling normal again because they've
mhm,
overdone it during their bleeding
mhm.
days. So I love that you mentioned that because that rest week really is critical for reducing all kinds
Yeah.
of other symptoms in our bodies.
Yeah. And, that's the other thing. It's not a hard and fast rule of like, oh, I'm in my menses day one, right? Like, you can feel some things happening in that late luteal and even in early follicular, and that's kind of what we're getting at here is like, what is your cycle? What is your energy?
Mhm.
And paying attention to it, right? And like honoring that and like to again capitalize on like, what can I do? Right. Cause that's often like, well, okay, I'm not supposed to do anything.
Mhm.
And, we overthink, and a lot of the fitness industry will tell you what you're supposed to be doing. And there's a lot of guilt and shame
Mhm.
in the industry. And I'm like, okay, here's what you can do instead of what you should be doing, right? You can sit on the floor and you can get up off the ground. You can go for barefoot walks to the woods, right? If you have woods or nature, right? You can move, but just move in a gentle, compassionate way.
Mhm.
Physical therapists would talk about ADLs, activities of daily living, and like, oh, do your ADLs, right? Like, what are the things you need to do at your job? What are the things you need to do at home? But I would encourage, like, if you have a family and people are able bodied, make them do stuff, right? Hey, like, and, the old joke, like, oh, she must be on her period, or like angry, right? Leverage that. Like, hey, do you care about my well being, right?
Mhm.
I need you as a partner to pick up the slack, right? This is just what it needs to be. And if we respect women, as so many of us say we do, then we have to be able to pick up that slack. We have to be able to pick up that postpartum slack, right? And that's, you know, we've whittled down from allo parents and tribes to nuclear families. So it does put a little more emphasis and stress on the nuclear family, but like we also have to honor that. Otherwise, you end up with all kinds of long-term stuff and it could challenge the relationship and like stressors, right? And then it exacerbates symptoms,
Mhm.
right? So we have to like, you know, if we're going to honor that cyclical being, we have to have the conversation. And it's awkward, right? I'm the only guy I know out of most of my guy friends that talks about periods. But like,
My husband
oh, and I'm
says the
like,
same.
yeah, you know, and it's like, but do you have daughters? Do you not care? Like, why are you weird about this? Right. Like, I saw this really interesting post the other day. It's like, you know, Christians will talk about the blood of Christ and like drink it, right? But they won't like talk about women's bleeding, right?
Mhm.
Because that's gross. But like drinking a glass of wine to represent some other dude's blood, like that's okay, right?
Mhm.
And it's just weird, right? You're like, no, this is like a totally natural, normal thing, and we should be honoring that and giving the space and time because it's hard. Like I was saying before we got on here live, I can't. There's like I always think that I'm a man because like I couldn't be a woman because it's too hard, and you know we get man colds and we're devastated. So like if I had to like, I'd be done. I'd be devastated. If I was a male having to do female hormonal things, I would die. It would be that awful.
Well, and there's a lot of shame around that. Like you mentioned the shame piece a
Mhm.
little while ago, but like
Yeah.
women, when they, because a lot of us have come up through this culture of, in order to be successful, we have to work like a man. That extends to exercise, that extends to the way that we move through the world. And we have epidemic levels of fertility challenges and cycle related challenges in our culture
Yeah.
today because in order to be successful, we have been, and I'm going to go as far as saying brainwashed because we really have been brainwashed into thinking that in order to be successful, we have to be able to function on this 24-hour cadence. And that's just simply not how our bodies are designed.
Mhm.
And so let's take this a step further because I want to work our way through your whole guide. And
Yeah.
if
Yeah. Yeah.
anybody wants that deep dive on the cyclical moving with the menstrual cycle, definitely check out our
Mhm.
conversation in season 1. I'm going to apologize. I was learning how to edit at the time. So, ignore the quality of the recording, but the conversation was fantastic. And
Mhm.
that is a really great one if you want to look at the menstrual health side of things. It's called Move with Your Cycle, and it's in, I want to say, the first 5 episodes of season 1. I want to move into the fertility side of the journey too. And definitely, pull the thread all the way through perimenopause because I'm having huge numbers of women hit that stage in their life and go, holy shit, in their life right now. And I think, our movement practices supporting us all the way through all of this is critically important. So at the time of this recording, I am coming out of the first trimester into the second trimester. And I had reached out to Rock when I first found out that I was pregnant because I am an athletic, like exercise regularly kind of person. And because I had a history with recurrent miscarriage, which any one of you who've been following this show for a while know a bit about my story and some of the loss that I've been through that drives me to do the work that I'm doing today. So I reached out to him and I was like, listen, I want to be mindful and intentional about how I am doing my movement with my history. And I have to tell you, I did not realize the power of getting up and down off the floor until I started doing work with rock and realized that there are lots of ways to get up and down off the floor. And, as somebody who used to do tech stances as a martial artist and like not unfamiliar with moving my body in some different ways, thought that most of my flexibility and mobility was coming from yoga and things of this nature. Oh, no. No, even my chiropractor has said, wow, Adrian, your hip flexors are different. You're physically moving through space differently simply because all that I could handle energy wise and nausea wise in the first trimester was getting up and down off the floor in lots of creative ways. So let's talk a little bit about that pregnancy journey and supporting our body in the pregnancy journey, and then dovetail it into then once the baby's here, that bounce back culture.
Sounds good. So the first thing is, like, am I allowed to work out while pregnant? The short answer is yes. The long answer is and isn't complicated because, again, it's just it's not nuanced, but individuals are individuals. So, okay, I can work out. Cool. How can I work out? Don't do anything new at all. So if you've been doing CrossFit, right, like hardcore, and you've been to the CrossFit games, you can still do CrossFit as long as the pregnancy is healthy, as long as mom and baby are healthy. Like, we've seen women compete at high levels and then, while being like 8, 9 months pregnant. My own wife, with our second, at 7 months pregnant, she did a MoveNet cert, but that came with a cost. She ended up getting pubic symphysis separation. I forget the PFD or something like that, where that like piece of cartilage right between the pubic bone slightly separated, and it caused immense pain. And she couldn't sideline nurse because it hurt too much. And like, sideline nursing, for anyone who knows, is like gold, right? Like, oh, I can just be asleep, pull my boob out, baby's on it. I don't have to get up out of bed. So she wasn't able to do that as comfortably as she would have liked because she had this injury. But again, we acknowledge she was chasing a fitness thing when she should have not necessarily chased the fitness thing. But I wasn't going to stop her. She knew what she was doing. She made her choices. I supported her, and we learned lessons. So that being said, right, honor your body. And you can almost think about it as like, okay, that training mindset. I'm going to have a baby. I'm going to be in labor. This is going to be a thing. And what happens after baby is born can influence what we do before baby is born. So I would, again, emphasize, like Adrian said, getting up and down, up off the ground, because what are you going to be doing a lot of? Getting up and down, right? And if you can do that easily before the baby comes, you'll be that much more capable after baby arrives, right? And I would emphasize strength training and breathing, and not breathing to just breathe, but to kind of jump forward a little bit, like pressure management issues, peeing, so sneeze peeing. I don't know how many people are familiar with that. I think everyone is at this point, or at least like, oh yeah, women always go to the bathroom after they sneeze. Why? Because of you. And they point to like some large-headed baby, right? But, that's a pressure management issue. So we know, pressure management issues, and I'm going to get into a little bit of postpartum because it affects how we talk about and training during pregnancy. So pressure management, things that are diagnosed with pressure management are hernias and diastasis recti. Kind of that stretching can create some pressure management issues. Any prolapse, like hernias, prolapse, knees peeing, all those things, right? So there is like this outward pressure. When we exhale, we shouldn't be going out. We should be coming in, right? So when I inhale, diaphragm goes down, lungs fill up. When I exhale, pelvic floor and diaphragm should come up and everything should come in. So, but pressure management, prolapsy things, right? That's like things are going out when they should be coming in. So there's the breath work we could be doing, and you can share because you've done a little bit of this, is that good diaphragmatic 360, really training that transverse abdominis to kind of keep it tight so we can prevent overstretching in the long run and recover more quickly, because your organs get smushed everywhere. And, it's like you can't breathe, you can't take a full breath, all these things. But like, so focusing on the breathing now before your belly gets really big and doing like really good strength training, I'll get a little bit more into that specific in a second, but breathing mechanics, I would say, are almost more important than any strength training we do, because it's the first thing you can do after the baby arrives. So the more comfortable and the stronger you can get your muscles, right, and your system operating effectively beforehand will lead to greater outcomes on the back end. And just like we now have, surgeons send people to physical therapy before operating on limbs because they know having a stronger person leads to better outcomes. So we need to, again, adopt that, like, oh, I'm going to get pregnant, thinking about trying to get pregnant, or I am pregnant. What can I do now to set me up later? So breathing big one, strength training. Babies are heavy, right? Carriers are heavy. Life is heavy. Laundry is heavy. And, unfortunately, all those things don't stop after the baby arrives. And a vast majority of information focuses on, here's what to do before the baby comes, but no one talks about life after. So we'll get to that. But we have to train, right? Because if the baby's going to be, X pounds, if we could only live, let's say, 10-pound baby, right? If I've only ever deadlifted regularly 10 pounds, now I've lost a lot of core strength. That 10-pound baby is going to take its toll. But if I strength train adequately and I get up to like 50 to 100-pound deadlifts, my capacity is now increased. So that 10-pound baby is almost nothing as far as what you're capable of handling. And when we can handle higher loads and we have a higher capacity, then we not only will have a faster recovery, but the work at the back end in postpartum doesn't seem as catastrophic and detrimental because we've trained. And before everything gets uncomfortable and laxity, because that's the other thing we have to manage in pregnancy is late pregnancy, there's a lot more laxity. But that's okay because that's what your body's supposed to do. It's supposed to be letting go, right?
Are you interested in sound healing and wish to use it for self-care in the comfort of your own home? Join me for Relax and Restore, a sound healing course to ground, relax, and support your body. In today's world, we are pulled in too many directions, feeling overwhelmed and overscheduled much of the time. What if you had a quick and easy way to help your body relax when experiencing anxiety and maybe just unwind at the end of a crazy day? Join me for the upcoming Relax and Restore class offered both in person in my office in Dover, New Hampshire, and online through Zoom, and learn how you can use sound to relax and nourish your overtaxed system and feel replenished to take on another day. Details about the upcoming class are available in the show notes. And now, back to the show.
And, Kegels, let's get onto that real quick. That's a level of strength training thing, but I want all the jaw clincher, butt clincher, belly holders, type A, just kind of wound a little too tight. It's not your fault. It's okay. Don't do Kegels. Because if my bicep is flexed, I can't flex it anymore. And if you're a jaw clincher, abdominal clincher, butt clincher, chances are you're already holding a really tight Kegel and you need to let go, right? Now, the people who are like, right? They're just loose, which, yeah, we'll go with that. They need to do Kegels to strengthen that pelvic floor. So Kegels aren't a magical fix. It's very dependent on, I would say, almost personality type and physical body, right? Like, are you a loose person? Then you might need a little more tightening, a little more strengthening, right? If you're a tight person, you need to let go. And that's where the breathing really comes in and learning how to sync your breathing up with your strength training, right? Like I can brace pelvic floor up, brace that transverse abdominis, do the lift, and then I can hold that engagement, lower the weight, and then relax. And so syncing that floor and core with your movement is challenging, but like doing it during pregnancy is going to be huge. And because I'm a meathead, get as strong as fucking possible while you're thinking about getting pregnant and early stages of pregnancy. And then towards the end, do the bare minimum. Get up and down, up off the ground, carry the laundry, carry the groceries. And as long as mom and baby are healthy, you'll be fine. Right. Yeah.
That was a really important one for me because, while I was strength training before I got pregnant and I was training regularly and, I was seeing progress in all of the different phases in terms of how my body was performing. And I was really proud of that. For as aware between meditation and the breathing techniques that I've done and all of that, for as aware as I was about how my pelvic floor was supposed to expand when I took a deep belly breath, the exercises that Rock gave me, I actually found, because I became very conscious of this outward pressure situation, that there were times that the sneeze would catch me off guard. And now that I had this little being in my low belly, it changed the equation just enough that the very first of a sequence of sneezes, I was like, oh shit. And then the second one, I was like braced the way that I was supposed to be. So I can't stress enough how powerful these breathing exercises that he's talking about are, because it doesn't take a lot of baby in your abdomen to start changing the way that this all shows up and how it feels. And so you do have sneezes that catch you off guard and you're like, oh, did I pee a little? I don't know. Right. Like, and I've done all
Mhm.
the work for my pelvic floor. I've been to a pelvic PT. This is the world that I work in. And I still had the first
Mhm.
few sneezes. And so when he followed up with me, I sent him a message back and I was like, yep, had a couple of surprise sneezes there. However, the breathing exercises he was having me do, I got much, much better and very quickly because I was being intentional about practicing these every day. And when you're nauseous and exhausted and smells make you want to retch and all of these things in the first trimester, like breathing and getting up and down off the floor is about all the extra energy that you've got. And this was so incredibly important for me. Like I watched my range of motion change in terms of my hips. I watched my ability to essentially catch my whole core in an appropriate configuration as I started to sneeze, because it already in the first few weeks of doing it was starting to become second nature. So I
Yeah.
can't stress enough just how important what Rock is sharing is. And I can vouch from firsthand experience how powerful this is. And I'm actually really excited as I go through my pregnancy to see how this is going to support me on the other end, because my postpartum recovery with my first child was a horror show. And after being a very strong, fit, functioning person prior to getting pregnant, I felt like I was starting at ground zero, maybe sub-zero, like subfloor. I don't know. Like I just I was
Yeah.
such a wreck when I
Yeah.
started my like movement practices again after I had my daughter. I was so discouraged because I had no idea how weak my core was going to be until I was in it.
Yeah. And then we haven't even talked about, C-sections, but we'll save that for postpartum. That's a whole nother thing you have to navigate is, whether it's diastasis, however you want to say it, or that C-section, there's trauma that happens. And if we're good, I'll just flow right into
Yeah.
the postpartum, how do we function again? Like you just went through like a marathon, right? Labors are all over the pace for individuals and the things that happen change the body. You know, when I go into the feminine seasons guide about all the top major concerns, you have like perineal tearing, you have diastasis, all kinds of stuff, prolapse and C-sections. And, all of those take a toll and so you have to heal, right? And first off, like, what do we need to heal? Rest, right? Like taking that rest, getting good food and breathing again, right? Like starting with that breath work and allowing your body to heal. And I think I just came up with, I need to go back into the guide and edit it because, I feel like the best analogy and coach you can have as a postpartum mom is the baby itself, right?
Mm.
Like when the baby starts walking and doing things, you can do those things again. Levels up, right? Like asterisks,
Yeah.
and I think about motor development, right? And, you know, my natural movement background, where there's crawling, there's rolling on the ground, there's different sits. And, babies into toddlerdom have to earn all of those progressions,
Mhm.
right? They don't just magically know how to do all these things. Hello, kitty. Have to earn if they want to explore the world around them, they have to earn it. They have to strength train by moving their bodies. If I want to go from my back to my belly, I have to learn as a baby how to roll, right?
Mm.
That's hard. If we took every listener right now and go, I want you to lay on the ground and roll from your back to your belly. We could use a lot of momentum and it could happen fast. But
Yeah.
if I go, I want you to move as slow as possible and control and articulate every vertebrae,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it gets hard and it's like workout,
Yeah.
right? And we need to think about that. Like, how do I sit up out of bed, right?
Mhm.
Do I try to flex the torso? No, the more natural pattern is a roll. Like if we
Mhm.
think about how a baby rolls, the big head, right, carries its body and it flops, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
As adults, we have a little bit more cognition. We can like, oh, I can control this movement pattern. And
Mhm.
we start to, again, as long as there's no like massive belly in the way, all right, and you're somewhat safe to be on your belly. But like those early stages, do those rolling patterns, do some rocking, like treat yourself like a small baby going through its motor development sequences. And that's like, I don't know, it took me like 12 plus years to think of that. It's like, oh yeah, follow the baby, right? As
Mhm.
the baby progresses movements, you can progress movements. Asterisk being like, if you're relatively in shape,
Mhm.
you can speed that process up a little bit. But again, taking that time and like when the kid's running, you could run again, right? Like,
Mhm. Mhm.
because you're like at that place, okay, I've done all the baseline work. And yeah, it was just like, I was like, oh yeah, just do what the baby does. Right. And then you're getting that bonding time. And I know that's such a hard time for mothers is how do I get my body back?
Yes.
Right. Which can mean, how do I look like I did when I was 19? Your body changes, right? Like my wife's not super hippie, but she goes, wow, I have hips now. And I was like, kind of, right? Like
Yeah.
she's not hippie, but she has more hips now
Yep.
than she did before 2 kids, right? And it's just there, it just sets, right? So the body changes. And like the really cool thing, well, I think it's cool because like her body was so like everything happened faster with the second kid because her body's like, oh, we know how to have a baby.
Mhm.
And like it
Mhm.
just ramped up production so much faster, which is kind of cool to see. And for us, we talking about movement in the postpartum journey, we converted our house from a normal furniture sitting up high, etc., to a ground-based, floor-based lifestyle with a rock wall in our living room for our kids. And so our dining room table, I cut the legs off, all these things. And again, just our anecdote of N equals one for my wife, her recovery postpartum for second kiddo compared to first kiddo was so much faster. It was harder in some ways because we lived on the floor, like we had a Japanese futon, we slept on it, or we had nugget couches in our living room, we sat low at the dinner table. But, we before my second was born, like a full year before he was born, we had officially transitioned to floor-based lifestyle. So my wife had a whole year of living on the floor, getting up and down off the ground. Now, 8, 9 months into the second pregnancy, she hated me. She's like, "Why are we leaving? Why do we live on the floor? I fucking hate you." But her recovery was
Better.
faster because she already had that huge baseline
Mhm.
of moving through our house. And then the cool thing is our house allowed for the motor development encouragement of our children, right? Because where do they exist? Low to the ground. So we were spending more just passive bonding time with our kids exploring movement together because we were meeting them at their level. And we were also getting the benefit of floor based life,
Mhm.
right? So it's this like easy thing. Like, so if you could do anything to help yourself postpartum is get rid of your furniture and live on the floor. That's the easiest thing. Now, spouses are going to be like, why? That's dumb. I like my lazy boy, right? And, how do people sit and all these other things? And it gets complex. And that is an extreme way to live, but it'll make a huge difference
Mhm.
in that postpartum journey. So, the big things are like pressure management issues, right? So lots of women and then perineal tearing and then the diastasis and C-sections, right? Like those are all big concerns,
Mhm.
but that pressure management, I'm going to come back to strength training. And like we've all like exerted ourselves, like, right? And he's ever had a hemorrhoid,
Mm.
that's a pressure management issue, right? You're pushing out when you sit bringing in and creating all that intra-abdominal pressure will cause things like a hemorrhoid, right? So if you have a history of hemorrhoids, you have a history of pressure management. So addressing those Because again, postpartum, like depending on where you are when you give birth, they'll be like push, 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 instead of just like acknowledging that women have babies in comas with no incidence, right?
Yes, thank you.
Because because the thing that gets in the way is our brain and our knowing things. When the uterus will contract,
Hmm.
and you can get in different positions to encourage the uterus to contract more. Like the more uncomfortable you are laboring,
Hmm.
the more that uterus is going to contract. And it's a muscle. It knows what it's doing. You just have to get out of the way
Hmm.
and not help it. Right. So when we allow the muscle to do what the muscle does, things progress more smoothly. And when we're like pushing or bearing down and like that can create a lot of pressure management issues. And that doesn't get talked about enough
Hmm.
in birth education, right? Like let the uterus do it, right? You just breathe with it, right? Let go, exhale, just go limp, and the uterus will contract. But if we start trying to force things, then we end up with those pressure management issues. And that's a big concern because those take longer to recover from,
Hmm.
right? Like the more pressure management issues we have, the longer our recovery journey will be. It's not impossible to like, recover like, older women who I used to work with would be like, that's just what you deal with. Like I'm 60 years old. I pee when I sneeze. It's just like the cost of being a mom. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And it might not ever get to be where it was before, but it doesn't have to be as bad as it is.
Hmm.
And that's the reality. Like some people are just never going to get back to where they were. And that's okay because like your body gave you a child, you grew a human. You have this wonderful thing. It served you. It served this purpose. And that comes like, like I try to tell my boys, everything is a choice, right? And everything has outcomes.
Hmm.
And, it is going to be this thing, right? And we can't control how we labor, all the outcomes, but we can at least prepare to increase our odds of having better outcomes and embracing that, okay, these things could happen, but what can I do to prepare for them? And then when I'm in that state is what can I do to help me recover? Breathe, first of all. If you can't move and you're nursing, make someone bring you soup,
Hmm.
right? Good, bone brothy, full of vitamins and nutrition soups, and just sit there, drink soup, nurse baby, and do your breathing exercises. And then you can start to roll, get up, things like that. But we have to honor that rest, right? Like, again, I think postpartum is kind of like that winter period, right? It is a rest and restore. Take the time. Spring will come, the grass will be green again, but why rush it? Like, because eventually your kids are older and they don't want you to hold them anymore and they're too big and you just miss that like tiny baby phase,
Mm, I
which is,
love that.
yeah, yeah, just the snuggles, right? Like, because they don't need anything more for those first, couple months other than snuggles and
Hmm.
sleep, which we should be like, oh, just follow the baby's cue, right? I don't have to do the laundry. I don't have to do the dishes, right? I don't have to do any of those things. I could just be with this baby and rest and breathe,
I
right?
love that.
Yeah.
That is the perfect picture of what your fourth trimester should look like. It really
Yeah.
is. And there's more and more
Mhm.
conversation about the fourth trimester now, which I'm really excited about. And I'm happy that there's more and more awareness growing. But you said it perfectly: bone brothy soups, congee with bone broth
Yeah.
base, like easy to
Yeah.
digest, because you have to figure like you've had a little person pushing all your organs out of the way for a long period of time, and everything is coming back into position. Your fundal height of your uterus is coming back down into the pelvic bowl. Your organs that have been displaced by this little person who's been kicking them for several months are all coming back into position. Like, all of that takes time. It took you 9 months to grow this small human. It's going to take you at least that to really feel vital again. And because we
Mhm.
do such a poor job with this
Mhm.
phase in our country,
Yeah.
because we're trying to get back into our pre-baby clothes, we have to get back to work. Moms separate from their babies because of a lack of paid maternity leave, and that could be an episode entirely unto itself.
Yeah.
But we just have this push, 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 get back to regular life kind of culture. And because of that, like, we end up with a lot of health issues and postnatal depletion. You could see it up to 10 years after giving
Yeah.
birth to a baby.
No, it's wild. And I think about, we're on this regenerative farm here in Mississippi, and we talk about healing the soil, right?
Hmm.
And bringing all the different things back to the land to help heal the soil to grow more nutritious food and raise more nutrient dense animals. Like we have to think of humans, we're not different than nature. Like we need to replenish, right? Like, where's your compost? Right?
Yeah.
Like, where are these? Where's your sunlight? All these things matter, right? Like we are nature-based beings. Are we doing the things that we would see in nature? Right.
Hmm.
And that is a rest period. That is nutrition. That is all these things. That is, you know, isolation. Like the baby blues is a real thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, are you getting your community, right? Or are you getting a mother-in-law or mother who has all these opinions on how you could be doing your baby
Hmm.
and things, and you need your partner or whomever to set that boundary? Like, no, you're a bad person right now. Like, we know you mean well, but like you're stressful and we can't have that energy in our home. And
Hmm.
sometimes you have to ask someone to hold that space for you
Hmm.
because all those things matter. Because again, there's so much guilt and shame, right? And it's just very unfortunate. Yeah.
So now that we've come through this postpartum period, I do want to make sure that we touch on the perimenopause side of the guide that you're offering, because there are a huge number of women who are coming into this phase of their life right now and going, what the hell is going on? And because their hormones are changing, because our world is moving faster than it's ever moved before, when we're hitting this hormonal transition, it feels awful. A lot of us are navigating, and I say us because I'm included in this demographic, dealing with teenagers who are in adolescence, and they have the same hormone shifting, except they are coming online and we are coming offline in terms of these bleeding years.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot of the same irritability and frustration. So, that can make for interesting household dynamics because teens are challenging enough on their own. I am living it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
one thing that I hear a lot from my clients outside of mood related things and cycle irregularity is all of a sudden I'm soft in the middle.
Mhm.
What can I do about this? So let's talk a little bit about movement in that perimenopausal and menopausal phase of life. And, let's help empower women to feel not really at the mercy of this stage of their life, but really thrive during this stage of their life.
Yeah. Yeah. So the biggest concerns, right, are like, what did you call it? The spread,
Yes.
the midsection spread. And then medical concerns are, like osteoporosis, bone density, et cetera. And then sarcopenia or muscle loss and strength loss, right? And so, if I had to choose like a favorite season for the feminine, it would be perimenopause and menopause because then you get to train like a dude, right? Like a
I love
meathead
that.
dude, right? Like you're just some bro banging weights. And like I want everyone to Google like jacked grandmas.
Yeah.
And you'll see these older women in their 70s competing as bodybuilders, powerlifting in the 300-pound realm. And some of them didn't get into strength training until their 50s and 60s, right?
Mhm.
But there is like, how do you improve bone density? Get fucking strong. How do you improve muscle loss? Get fucking strong and bang weights, right? Like you get to finally, because you're not worried about estrogen. Like let that estrogen train leave the station. And then now all of a sudden you have this untapped natural response. And that's this testosterone that has been there at levels now has nothing to compete with. And isn't it cool if we think about it? Like, what is this natural thing that just seems to occur for all women is, oh, bone density and muscle wasting are a thing as I age and go through perimenopause into menopause. If only there was a thing that my body knew could account for that. Oh, now we have testosterone and we can utilize that testosterone to build muscle mass and improve bone density and human growth hormone. We can tap into those resources for the strength training piece, right? Like really focusing on lifting heavier weights, build like rucking, right? Like you've never rucked before. That just means throw weight in a backpack and walk, hike. Those are the things that are going to put stress on the skeletal system and the muscular system and will help you minimize the loss of all those things, right? And getting jacked, right? You want to play with your grandkids? Well, be a second grandparent, right? Like
Mhm.
think about it now. Like, okay, I want to be able to play with my grandkids. I want to run and jump and be able to prevent injuries from falls, right?
Mm.
So you get to adopt this like playful mindset, like, oh, okay, I'm going to take my grandkids to the playground. Can I do the things that I would love to be able to do with them on the playground? Start doing those now,
Mhm.
right? Like you worried about balance and falls, practice balancing and falling, right? Be smart about it. Like don't bite off more than you can chew, but really starting to think about like, okay, what would a 19-year-old bro do? Do
Mhm.
that, right? And like you can have fun with it. And like it is crazy awesome to see all these women in their 60s and 70s and beyond, like cultivating mass, right? If there's any, it's always sunny in Philadelphia fans, Mac was always cultivating mass. And like you can do that as a woman going through those. And that'll help with, we know this when we put it into practice in earlier stages of life that, women talk about like, I want a certain body, I want to be toned, etc.
Mhm.
But, but they go down that cardio rabbit hole. But if they started strength training, that creates more of a change physiologically in a beneficial way for muscle and body composition than does cardio, right? So like doing the cool lifting bro stuff, if you will, earlier in life will set that up for it to be even more effective down the road. And like NPR, I think this morning I saw an article that says women who strength train live longer and
Mm.
have better metabolic outcomes, right? So, there you go. NPR said it. And they even acknowledge the physiological differences between men and women and how strength
Nice.
training can be beneficial to help with the like common concerns that women have with body comp. And I was, yeah, we've known that. Just say it more, right? And
Yeah.
louder,
We need to
you know.
normalize it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we totally need to normalize it because, like,
Yeah.
one of the other concerns that women have is, well, I don't want to look like a dude.
You're gonna look like, a nice, I don't know if I've watched a lot of, well, I used to watch more TV, but like Viking women, like they're
Yeah.
not like overtly huge women in the show Vikings. They're still feminine, right? But
Yes.
they're like kind of cool looking, right? If that's your aesthetic. But like being a strong woman, you're never gonna look like a jack dude. Now, women who do look very muscular, they're on steroids.
Mhm.
And a vast majority of dudes who look like that are on steroids. There's not a male superhero actor right now who wasn't on steroids. And if they say they're not, they're lying because there's a whole guy who basically calls everybody out and knows what gear they're on. So that is all misleading, right? Like they don't get those physiques naturally. Those are unnatural physiques because they're enhanced with pharmaceuticals. Strong women never will look like
Mm.
big and muscular. Why? Because hormones prevent them from getting that big,
Mhm.
right? When you're a menstruating woman, your hormones prevent you from getting that big. Now, jacked grandmas, on the other hand, they're not going to see that same size either, but they can be more jacked,
Mhm.
more muscle mass as an older woman than they could as a younger woman, again, because of hormone profiles.
This is
Um,
something I keep saying to my husband. I was like, I cannot wait to get to that phase of my life because I am
yeah,
more of your endomorphic body type. So,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
I am built for the famine in Northern Ireland, but I
yeah.
never will be that super, like, cut kind of physique. And I told him, I said, I'm actually really excited about this phase of my life because I'll have more of a shot at maybe looking something like that.
Yeah, yeah, you will. You totally will. And that's another thing that, it gets talked about, I see a lot more in like the male side of fitness, like different body types. And, I was having this conversation with a young gal the other day here on the farm. She has the body type she has, but the aesthetic she wants is more of that, like of a long distance runner, right?
Mhm.
But like people who run long distance all look alike, right?
Mhm.
At a higher level. The world's strongest women and men all look alike. They have
Mhm.
similar body types, and when we honor our body type and our phase of cycle, right, in season, then we can cultivate different results. But we have to acknowledge that, like, I have, like, if you have thick thighs and big hips,
Mhm.
guess what you get to do? Deadlift heavy ass things,
Yes.
carry a rucksack, be strong, right? Like all the women who do Ninja Warrior, they all look the same, right? and they're going to be built similar, but they're not necessarily going to be able to cultivate a level of strength and mass that would be required to drag people off a battlefield, because that takes a different kind of body. And, when we talk about sport specific training and sport specific bodies, we can see those patterns. We can see those archetypes, and we have to okay, what do I feel more inclined to do with fitness, and lean into those things? Because again, you're honoring your body, your season, etc. And that's another thing to consider is if you're, we'll say a more stout woman, right? Which I like to just equate myself to a dwarf sometimes because I'm a little bigger, and I'm I would totally be a dwarf. Not running fast. I'm swinging an axe and I'm having a good time. I'm not being like an elf, right? Doing all kinds of crazy stuff, but that's elf bodies. I'd rather be a dwarf anyways, right? And we get to, when we think of it that way, then we're able to focus our training more so, and we'll feel better because we're matching those energies and those efforts with who we are and how we're structured.
It's one of the things that I totally fell in love with strength training when I really started getting into it, because I could deadlift a truck, man. I am not a tall human being. I have the thick thighs, wider hips, even before I had children. And, I used to joke that, Brunhilde right here, because I'm short to the ground, but I could outlift when I was training in a group with other people. I could outlift them by double what other people could. And it was effortless to me. And there was a woman in the group who was definitely more of that elven body shape, right? In Chinese medicine, it's more of a wood type. And I definitely was not that body shape. And she used to ask me, how is it that you're at 315 for your deadlift right now? And I can't get out of the 120s. And I'm at the time, I didn't know the answer. So I was just I don't know. It just feels good. So you're totally
exactly.
right. Our bodies, because of our ancestry, because of, our heritage does play into it. I would have been dragging bodies off of the field as a medic or something like that, because that's just how I'm built. And it took me a little bit, just because the cultural ideal of beauty when I was growing up was that Kate Moss, super rail thin kind of body shape.
Right. And that's what we don't acknowledge. The fashion industry just wanted human hangers. How do the clothes sit on the runway? Right. And that's what it is. And that's not a body. Because for me, I like thick thighs because thick thighs save lives.
Yeah, they do.
Right. That's they do. Right. So I'm I want a little more meat. And then I'll have my wife, she'll flex and she's got really good vascularity and nice, good muscle tone. And some dudes are yeah, that's kind of gross. I'm why are you emasculated by a strong woman? Is there something about strong women that intimidates you and you feel less of a man? Because that's just your projection, right? And I think about how we live our lives. We're both physically capable. That allows us to live these more value-centric lives because we like doing physically based things. And so we were cultivating that body. And she's a boy mom. And they roughhouse. So Annie has this she'll get in there every once in a while and she'll roughhouse with the boys. And because she's strong and trains a certain way, they're mommy's too rough. Right. She's too much. Right. But she's built to do those things and she has fun with it. Right. Where, not and that can be also just not learning how to roughhouse appropriately for some folks. But, she gets to enjoy some of these normal boy mommy things more so. Fitness and movement routine supports that kind of stuff. So
I love that. I love that. This is a topic that I feel I could talk to you all day about. And I always love when we have an opportunity to sit down and talk about it. But I want people to know where to find this amazing guide that you've put together and how they can get in touch with you.
Yes. So my website is strengthplaynature.com. And, we'll make sure you get that in the show notes and all that. And I have on my website, there is, you'll navigate the page, but you're looking for the feminine seasons. And in there is a guide. And it's almost 30 pages. Yeah, it's almost 30 pages. All this different information about moving through the feminine seasons and a very natural movement approach, right? So we get into all those different things. There's sample workouts, etc. It's available for $249, and I'm working on trying to curate some different pricing structures to help people with different needs. So that's something I'm working on, but that is we'll say the living wage cost of the program. And then supplemental to that, all the movements and videos I talk about are available in my Rewild membership. And so that is going slowly building out to be this very comprehensive Rewild approach to health and wellness, where I have, I think, at least 50 videos that complement this guide. So you could also, you have the guide, read through it, sit with it, understand it. And then if you're ready to engage with more movement, given that natural movement approach and other things, like then the Rewild membership is there. And so you have this whole library in addition to, and that's a separate cost as well. But anyone who buys the guide will get a discount to the Rewild membership. So, and I'll make
Awesome.
sure to get you the link to both of those things. So, yeah.
Perfect. I can definitely vouch for the fact that the library that he's referencing is priceless, because the way that everything is broken down and explained, it makes it very accessible, very
Mm.
easy to be able to integrate these things into your lifestyle. You'd be surprised at how quickly your body goes, oh, this is exactly what I needed. This is fantastic. Because I can honestly say I'm living proof of that. And I'm so grateful that I have a resource like Rock in my circle of community resources. And I would highly, highly encourage you to reach out. I have had an opportunity to look at this guide and have provided a testimonial for him. And it is a fantastic resource that I really think should be part of every woman's experience, because it does take you through every stage that you could and or will experience in your life.
Mm.
And it helps you to embrace every aspect of it and feel your best as you're going through it. So everything that you are looking for these amazing resources is going to be right in the show notes. Any final thoughts, Rock, before we sign off on this awesome episode?
Yeah, kind of to just hammer home the point of, we're all cyclical beings. And there's a lot of shoulds and guilt and shame in the fitness industry. And honor your body, honor your gut, honor your intuition. And, I encourage all your listeners, regardless of where they are, is to try to connect to that divine feminine. And what does it mean to embody femininity through the seasons? And it gets to be such a more rich, diverse story, right? Than like the narratives were sold, and like embracing those seasons for what they are, right? And the wisdom that gets to come from those. And just again, like you have this really awesome body, you have this inherent connection to the moon, moon cycles, moon calendars. There's all these really cool things. And then we get to see that divine femininity and how it plays out in community, in nature, and in life. And just, enjoy the ride because it is wild and free.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for your time and your
Yeah.
expertise. This has been, again, another awesome episode. So definitely check out our conversation in season 1. Share this with anyone that you feel needs to hear this message in this season 3. Reach out to Rock for this and other amazing resources that he has available for women, because this is what we need. We need to be talking about this more. And I'm so grateful for your expertise and for you sharing it with my audience.
Thank you so much for having me. And you're also welcome.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at MoonEssenceMe on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.